Welcome to my channel, Norton Investigates. My name is Edward Norton, and today we're diving deep into one of the most consequential energy infrastructure projects of the 21st century. A project that most Western media barely covers, but that will reshape global power dynamics for the next 50 years. If you're new here, this channel focuses on investigating the geopolitical and economic forces that actually drive world events, cutting through the noise to examine what truly matters. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because you won't want to miss what's coming. Now, let's get into it. In December 2019, Russia and China signed an agreement to build Power of Siberia 2, a massive natural gas pipeline that would transport approximately 50 billion cubic meters of Russian gas annually to China through Mongolia. The estimated cost is roughly $260 billion over the project's lifetime, making it one of the largest energy infrastructure investments in history. Throughout 2024 and 2025, this pipeline project has been accelerating toward reality, and once operational around 2030, it will fundamentally eliminate any possibility of Europe ever regaining access to Russian gas, even if political relationships normalize. Right now, in late 2025, Russia produces approximately 700 billion cubic meters of natural gas annually. Before the Ukraine war in 2021, Russia sent roughly 155 billion cubic meters to Europe, representing 40% of European gas consumption and forming the foundation of European energy security for decades. Throughout 2022 to 2025, Russian gas to Europe has collapsed by 90%, falling to approximately 15 to 20 billion cubic meters annually. Most of that lost European supply has been redirected to China, which now receives roughly 40 to 50 billion cubic meters annually via existing routes. Power of Siberia 2, when completed around 2030, will add another 50 billion cubic meters. Combined with Power of Siberia 1 at roughly 38 billion cubic meters capacity, Russia-China gas trade could reach 100 plus billion cubic meters annually by the early 2030s, potentially exceeding what Russia ever sold to Europe at peak levels. The pipeline would run approximately 2,600 kilometers from Russia's Yamal gas fields in western Siberia through Mongolia to China. These are the same Yamal fields that used to supply Europe before the war. Gazprom, throughout 2024 to 2025, has been conducting preliminary engineering and route surveys, while discussions with Mongolia have focused on transit agreements and discussions with China have centered on pricing and delivery schedules. Cost estimates range from $260 billion to over $300 billion, depending on whether upstream gas field development is included. This massive investment, once made, represents a sunk cost locking in the route for decades. The capacity, when fully operational, would be comparable to the Nord Stream 1 pipeline that used to carry 55 billion cubic meters annually to Germany before its destruction in 2022. The technical challenges of constructing Power of Siberia 2 should not be underestimated. The pipeline must traverse some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth, including permafrost regions in Siberia, mountain ranges in Mongolia, and seismic zones near the Chinese border. Winter temperatures along the route regularly plunge to minus 50 degrees Celsius, limiting construction windows to just 5 or 6 months annually. Engineers must design for thermal expansion and contraction across a 100-degree temperature range between winter and summer. The permafrost presents particular difficulties because the warm gas flowing through the pipeline can thaw surrounding frozen ground, causing subsidence and potential pipe ruptures. Gazprom learned hard lessons from Power of Siberia 1, where construction delays and cost overruns exceeded initial estimates by 40%. Those lessons are being applied here, but the scale of Power of Siberia 2 dwarfs the first project. Mongolia's role as a transit country deserves special attention that most analysts overlook. For this landlocked nation of just 3.4 million people sandwiched between two giants, the pipeline represents both opportunity and risk. Transit fees could generate $1 to $2 billion annually for Mongolia's economy, roughly 10 to 15% of current GDP. However, hosting critical Russian-Chinese infrastructure makes Mongolia a strategic target and reduces its ability to maintain neutrality between its powerful neighbors. Throughout 2024 to 2025, Mongolian officials have negotiated carefully, seeking maximum economic benefit while attempting to preserve some diplomatic independence. The outcome of these negotiations will determine whether Mongolia becomes genuinely prosperous or merely a quarter serving others' interests. Europe, throughout 2022 to 2025, has successfully replaced most Russian pipeline gas through increased LNG imports rising from approximately 80 billion cubic meters in 2021 to 150 plus billion cubic meters, increased pipeline gas from Norway rising to 125 plus billion cubic meters, maintained Algerian supplies at roughly 30 to 40 billion cubic meters, and reduced consumption from 400 billion to approximately 330 to 350 billion cubic meters. This is an enormous achievement accomplished in just 3 to 4 years. However, Europe's energy security remains precarious because LNG is more expensive than pipeline gas was. LNG supply is globally traded and subject to competition. Pipeline alternatives from Norway and Algeria are largely maxed out, and the system lacks the slack and resilience that cheap Russian pipeline gas used to provide. Russia gains several strategic benefits from Power of Siberia too. First, energy leverage over China emerges when Russia supplies 100+ billion cubic meters annually, making China dependent on Russian gas for a significant portion of energy needs. This gives Russia negotiating power in a relationship currently quite unbalanced in China's favor. Second, the pipeline generates revenue for 40 to 50 years of operations, providing predictable long-term income for Russian budget planning. Third, diversification away from Europe ensures that losing any single market doesn't threaten Russian gas export viability, serving as strategic insurance against future geopolitical conflicts. China likewise gains significantly from this arrangement. A secure gas supply from a land-based pipeline through Mongolia is much more secure than LNG imports that could be disrupted by naval blockades if US-China tensions escalate. Russian pipeline gas costs roughly $10 to $12 per million BTU, compared to Asian LNG prices fluctuating between $12 to $20, potentially saving China $5 to $15 billion annually over 40 to 50 years of operations. However, once the pipeline is built, Russia becomes dependent on Chinese purchases to justify the $260 billion plus investment, giving China leverage in the bilateral relationship. The net effect throughout 2025 to 2035 is bifurcation of global gas markets into distinct regional systems, with European markets served by Norway, Algeria, and LNG imports, Asian markets increasingly served by Russian pipelines plus LNG, and American markets served by domestic production. These regional markets will have less integration and arbitrage than before 2022, with prices differing more between regions and security of supply, depending more on regional infrastructure. Some European policymakers have hoped that eventually Russia-Europe energy relationships could normalize, but Power of Siberia, too, makes this impossible. Once Russian gas infrastructure is reoriented toward China with $260 billion plus in investment, that gas won't return to Europe, even if political relationships improve. The physical infrastructure determines flow patterns, and once built toward China, that's permanent for decades. Europe throughout 2025 to 2035 must accept that Russian gas is gone permanently, requiring continued massive investment in LNG terminals, internal pipeline connections, gas storage capacity, renewable energy, nuclear power, and energy efficiency. The cost will be hundreds of billions of euros. European energy will be structurally more expensive, and European industry will be less competitive globally. This pipeline represents Russia and China jointly constructing an alternative to the Western-dominated energy system, with the $260 billion plus investment comparable to the Marshall Plan in inflation-adjusted terms. As 2025 ends, the Russia-China energy axis is forming through concrete infrastructure investment that will define global gas markets for decades. The pipeline deal is the physical manifestation of a permanent divorce between Russian energy and European consumption, a relationship that was 40 plus years in building and just 3 years in destroying. So there you have it. Power of Siberia, too, isn't just a pipeline. It's a declaration of a new world order written in steel and concrete across 2,600 kilometers of Eurasian steppe. What we're witnessing is the physical infrastructure of deglobalization being welded together, one section at a time. The choices being made today in Moscow, Beijing, and Ulaanbaatar will constrain the choices available to policymakers in Berlin, Brussels, and Washington for the next half-century. The question now isn't whether this pipeline will be built. The momentum appears unstoppable. The question is, what comes next? Will Europe successfully transition to a post-Russian energy future? Or will high costs permanently weaken European industry? Will China's growing dependence on Russian gas create genuine partnership, or just a different form of vulnerability? And will Mongolia navigate its precarious position between two giants, or become merely a corridor for others' ambitions? If you found this analysis valuable, please like this video, subscribe to Norton Investigates. Thank you for watching. This is Edward Norton, reminding you that in geopolitics, infrastructure is destiny. I'll see you in the next investigation.